All right. Hello, Peter. Hello, Zia.
Hi, Matthew.
I'm Matthew. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's always fun having conversations with these two. Portals open up. So make sure you've got your seatbelts fastened and sit somewhere comfortable because I think we're going on a bit of a journey today. And like any good journey, they start a beginning. And we're going to start by going to the beginning. And we're going to begin by asking Zia your beginnings with your spiritual awakening, your journey, your whatever we want to call it, your mutation.
Okay, well, we might be here all day. I'll encapsulate it as best I can. I studied in the medicine wheel, the medicine wheel between 2002 and 2004, and that came about after I had several deaths in my family over a very short period of time. I had just moved out to the west coast of Canada, beautiful British Columbia. I was living in Vancouver at the time, and my cousin was killed, my dad passed away, my grandmother passed away, and my grandmother and my actually my aunt as well. So within just a few months, that was happening. And so I found these beautiful teachers that took me on this incredible journey into the Incan medicine field. It was a 2-year training and very transformative. And my goal at that time was just to make a friend of death and to understand what that was all about. And throughout that process, I had moved to Victoria. And just after I finished my training, my IU sister, who I had trained with, and I decided we were going to have this ceremony at a beautiful place in Victoria called Sax Point. And my friend had met Peter probably 2 or 3 months beforehand and had invited him to the ceremony. And so that was how Peter and I first met, was at a ceremony, a beautiful dispatches ceremony for Mother Earth. And it was on the 11/11/2006. And so we have been working together and doing ceremony ever since. And from that first ceremony, there was a small group of us that came together to co-create community in Victoria. And I'd been living in Victoria for a few years at that point, but was finding it really hard to connect with people, like-hearted people, like-minded people. And so we had all been feeling kind of the same way. And there were 5 of us that came together as this core team to put together something called Conscious Center Community, CCC. And that was an incredible community. We brought in guest speakers. Yes, we had you and Brad at one point coming, and we'd have a guest speaker come every month and talk about something different. And that was really exciting and just this wonderful energy. We would have a celebration every year with a different theme. And so much happened and the community really grew. And until it just felt like it wasn't actually needed anymore. There were some other groups coming together after a certain point. And so CCC just very naturally started to dissolve away. And as it was starting to dissolve away, this other thing started up. And at that time, Peter and I started meeting with this beautiful woman. Her name was Mary Dowds. And very gifted and very intuitive and very psychic. And she started picking up on this whole Catherine Maltwood trail and the Glastonbury Zodiac in the UK. And one thing led to another, and this incredible connection between her and Peter. He was in the UK working with the Glastonbury Zodiac there. And then all of a sudden, she just realized that there was a zodiac, Landscape Zodiac in Victoria. And so a Landscape Zodiac it's like the stars, the constellations, the zodiac in the stars being reflected in the land, and it shows up in the landscape through the contours of the landscape. You can see these beings, these shapes coming out in Google Earth and the maps. And just as Catherine Maltwood had intuited and discovered this happening, this structure in Glastonbury, Mary discovered there was one in Victoria, and very interesting. A few years apart, yes. Yes, and I should say that Catherine Maltwood, she could have moved anywhere in the world after living in Glastonbury. And of all the places she could have moved, she moved to Victoria. And so it never came out, you know, that she knew that there was a landscape zodiac in Victoria. But Mary was, you know, very certain. And so that was a magical, again, another magical adventure. It's just started in, I guess it was in Aries in, what year was that? 2011, right. So March, Peter was just like, let's go with this, and nobody else was ready, and we all kind of just ran, you know, flying by the seat of our pants, taking people out into each landscape, into each sun sign, starting with Aries in that March, which the whole thing started on Catherine Maltwood's birthday, which was April
17th.
So it was April 17th, yeah, 2011. And from there, we, you know, every month we would meet in the landscape in a different area and explore that sun sign. And so from Aries to Taurus to Gemini to Cancer, and we would spend a whole day out, and we were working with another really incredible guy. He was really amazing at finding these neat little spots in the landscape, you know, little parks that you never heard of, little magical places. And so we would go to all of these different places, and then we would end the day with a ceremony and plant a crystal in the landscape. And incredible. And people still talk about this. We did it for 3 years, 3 cycles. And Mary and I would work on a handout to give out each month as well. And that was quite intense and amazing as well, because she was making all of these discoveries. And then we both started making these really neat discoveries as we went.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm back in it again. I was following Peter and Zia when they were bringing this out back in 2011, and I was fascinated by it. And just in the last little while, it's kind of been, I don't even live in Victoria. When you move away, then suddenly these things become more interesting, right? So I've been fascinated by this landscape zodiac and just the, like you say, the mirror, the reflection of the stars upon the land, and what it brings out. And we're starting to hear about more of them in other parts of the world too, maybe somewhere near you. But this Victoria landscape zodiac's quite fascinating to me. Yeah.
It's all still there, and it's all people they still go, and just not as an organized group, but just go and sit there and explore that sun sign. And when we went through these walks, we would really go deep into the shadow of that sign, and then into the gift, and then to the higher aspects. And then lo and behold, when the 3rd cycle finished and came to completion, we knew that something was ending, but we were opening a space for something new to come in. And shortly after we completed the last cycle, and what year was that? 2014, I think.
2014, yeah.
Then Peter and I went to a landscape zodiac in New Mexico.
Oh.
Just after that, and for the Grand Cross alignment that was happening that year in April. And then when we came back, Peter had an interview lined up with Richard Rudd from the Gene Keys. And so should I hand it over to you then?
Yeah. So at that time, I had my own radio show, and you were on it with Voice America, Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation. And Richard was coming on with me. I didn't know him, and I got tipped off that he was someone I should interview. And he was coming to Vancouver in the near future. So we set up this interview to have the interview with him on my radio show. And he's English, I'm English, you're English. We had a great repartee, went really well. So he gifted me the Gene Key book online, the Golden Path, which is the journey through it. And obviously I got my free profile. And so I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is really good. So the following Monday, I met with my regular meditation group, and I said, we need to pay attention to this. Is big. This is really important. So he was then coming to Vancouver 2 days after that on the Wednesday. He did his interview, he did his one-day workshop in Vancouver. And then he went to the airport in Vancouver to fly to Portland on the Thursday because he was going to do Portland and the Bay Area. And the American border guards turned him back. They wouldn't let him into the country. The best decision they ever made, no question. So he went back to his hotel room. He did his 2-day workshop in his hotel room remotely in Portland. All these people were gathered for the Epiphany experience.
It was an epiphany.
Was it that no one knew?
And someone traveled from around, I know Mark Bentley.
Australia.
Come all the way from Australia
Yeah.
to Portland.
So they're in the Unity Church in Portland, and instead of Richard, the screen came down. Anyway, so what happened was he contacted me and I said, I've had a bit of a drama. I've cancelled my Bay Area trip. Can I come over? So the next thing I know, I'm meeting off the ferry and meeting him. And the next thing I know, he's coming to my meditation group on the next Monday.
Oh, wow.
And obviously he's he had his long hair then, so very recognisable. Everybody's going,
hair.
Isn't that Richard? I said, yeah, we've manifested him in 1 week. Here he is. Amazing.
Yeah.
So had a chat with Zia and I said, do you want to come and meet up with me and Richard? She said, no, I think you guys need to spend time on your own. So we went off and we had this beautiful walk. And I said to him, how do you feel? He said, I just want to have a completely still, silent walk. And I took him to Francis King Park, beautiful park. So we're walking there. Within 2 minutes, we just can't stop talking. It's like back and forth, back and forth. And he starts talking about the dream arc. And this is obviously very early on in this whole process.
Right.
And I thought, I wish Zia was here now because this would really, get her interested. And so we finish, we go and have lunch. And now we're driving back to my place, driving down the road, and there's this really interesting wall that Zia will explain in a minute. And I decide to pull over to show him this wall. And as I pull into the parking lot of the pub, which is the 4 mile pub, there's Zia right there in front of me. I couldn't believe it.
So,
over to you.
so what was happening with me was Peter the day before had said, Richard Rudd's coming to town. Do you want to hang out with us? And at this point, I'd looked at the book and I'd looked at the website, and I was just at that point in time, I was just trying to scale things down. I saw this huge book and I was like, oh, I don't think so. I don't think this is for me. No, you go. This is wonderful that you'll have, you'll have the day together, and you go and have a wonderful time. And so I had just moved to this new place in Victoria, and I was going to go out and explore. And just not too far from where I live, there's this incredible wall. It's on the Island Highway, just past the Admirals and Craig Flower intersection, and it's on Island Highway, and it's just this incredible wall. It's called Love Story, and it's just made of stone. And so I went up there and I was just looking at it because I was always driving by, but I never had a chance to really look at it. And so I was just feeling this incredible energy from this wall and taking pictures. And then I looked across the road and I realized there was another sculpture on the other side of the road. And so I was just feeling this incredible energy. And I realized that the artists had created this portal here. They was infused with this incredible energy. And the wall itself, I hadn't noticed before, but there was all kinds of rose quartz and clear quartz all embedded with the stone. And then on the other side was this incredible bench with just these huge, I think, basalt stones that again were just calling to me. So I crossed the road and I went over and I was taking a picture of the insignia of the artist because I thought I really have to get in touch with these people. There's something going on here and I really want to connect. And just as I was about to snap the picture, I heard, "Hey, Zia." I looked up and there's Peter and there's Richard Rudd and they're parking in the parking lot. And the next thing I know, we're all sitting on this bench together. And this is one of the most, the busiest places in Victoria, all this traffic going by, but it was just like everything stood still. And we were just in the center of this,
Jinkies
yes, vortex. And it just all this incredible stillness was happening. And Richard started telling me about the dream arc and how, it was like the shamanic aspect of the gene keys. And he was talking about how all of the creatures came in a vision, and they all kind of landed in their special place with each particular gene key, and they're all, and in my mind I was seeing like all of these like 64 kind of empty totem poles, and then all these creatures came in and took their place on these totem poles.
Okay.
And then as he was talking, this little boy just kind of appeared from nowhere, and he was wearing he had like a ladybug bicycle helmet on, and he had a spider on his t-shirt, and these were just the creatures, the same creatures that Richard had just been talking about. And he was looking at us with like these big wide eyes, because he could really feel the energy, and he just knew what something was going on, something really neat was going on. And his mom came along, and she was just like, oh, I'm so sorry, and she starts pulling him away, and we're just like, no.
No.
Yeah, it was magic. It was absolutely magic. And so that was my way into the gene keys, was through the dream arc, and just through that whole experience, because we ended up spending the rest of the afternoon together, and coincidentally as well, this was in the Virgo effigy of the Landscape Zodiac, and Richard is a Virgo. So when I got home that day, and Richard also gifted me the golden path by the end of that day as well. So when I got home, I was just like, oh my goodness, there's something going on here that's so much bigger than me. I had this plan for the day, and then this happened. And so after that,
You're the one that said, no, this is for you too.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be there.
And then suddenly all of this happened. So, here we are, however many years later, almost 10 years later.
Yeah.
And and so much has happened since. We've traveled to Cortez Island. Richard came back to do the 7 sacred seals, and he came back yet again to do the 64 names of love in Victoria. And so it really, whatever reason for him to get diverted from Portland to Victoria, it really, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people have done the epiphany experience, and I've taken people through the epiphany experience, and they've heard the version this side of the border, where people were sitting there and experiencing that. And they weren't experiencing this side where you two are in bliss, because it's like. So if you want to blame anybody for a lack of epiphany experience that weekend. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you had the breakthroughs in the, yeah.
It changed our lives because Richard fell in love with the Pacific Northwest.
He loves it here.
And obviously, it opened the door for me to become very deeply connected with him personally, but also at that point to become his main facilitator in Canada, which you now have also joined.
Yeah.
So, it was a huge opening for me, and I've made basically my life since has been dedicated to the transmission of the gene keys, and that's what I do every day. But I want to come back to one of the things that Bazir can just also come back to, because Richard, as many of you will know, has just done this Into the Mystic, this one-day workshop in Boulder, Colorado. And one piece that he said he'd never said publicly before was when he had his very first altered state of experience as a young man. I wish that had been filmed, Matthew. It must have been unbelievable what was going on, and what he was doing. And he was having this expanded experience. But what he never said before was, as he was driving through England and Wales, he was being shown these artifacts that were buried in the landscape from eons before, which were all interconnected. He said there were 13 of them. He called them the 13 hallows. And Richard talks about a terma. And a terma, by definition, is a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist belief system that in a previous life, when you reach a certain level of consciousness, leave something behind to be discovered in a future life when you come back to that level of consciousness. And Richard believes the gene key transmission is itself a terma, that it has to be put away because we lost our way until such time as we came back. And so he created this gene key transmission because it was ready, it was time. And that's why we are the representatives of that transmission in the world today. So when he was talking about driving through that landscape in England and Wales in this expanded state and all these artifacts that were buried, we are doing that ourselves right now. We are burying these incredible amethyst crystals in different locations to seed this energy for the future.
And this is primarily on Vancouver Island?
Vancouver and the islands around Vancouver Island, yeah. So we're connecting this energetically in. But the key thing now is what I'm feeling really strongly is that we've reached that point now where all of these artifacts that have been dormant are about to rise, or they are rising. And right now we're in the 20th gene key, which is in human design. It's the cross of the sleeping phoenix with the 34, 59, 55. So I think the sleeping phoenix is waking up because we're going through this consciousness shift. And just on the drive up today, Zia had this epiphany about that wall. Can you explain that?
Yes, so the wall where we all met that day. And so I did eventually get in touch with the artists, and they're called Ancient Art of Stone. They're still around, and it's his name is Andreas, and his wife is Naomi Kunert, and they're incredible artists, and they collect their stones from all over the world, and just incredible. They do all kinds of portals and doorways, and I asked them, I said, what do you put in that wall? Because I can definitely feel there's something in there. And sure enough, they put in a time capsule for View Royal with school kids putting in all different kinds of cards and drawings and things like that. And then for themselves personally, they'd also added some very special crystals and a couple of other things that they weren't, just really personal things that they weren't ready to talk about or disclose. But if like the wall is called, the sculpture is called Love Story, so you can just imagine it's basically a symbol of their love for each other, and they just planted that in this incredible spot on the road that people drive through every day, and they're driving through that love portal every day and feeling that. They may not realize it.
They may not be even consciously aware.
Yeah.
Or suddenly I get triggered.
So that was my epiphany, was that they had planted a terma in the wall as well. So that was just the perfect spot for all of that to converge on that day.
Yeah.
So we are in the apocalypse right now.
Yeah.
And these epiphanies are demonstrating that the word apocalypse really means the revealing. And it's the revealing of everything. It's all the corruption on the planet. It's all these artifacts that are here to support us. So I really encourage everybody to be aware of these events, these circumstances, these synchronicities that are literally lifting everything up from below the surface to be seen. And it includes these artifacts and tuning into them. And just amazingly, I mean, this synchronicity, is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just this week on Gaia TV, this new episode series with Alan Green of Codon Shakespeare's come. And sure enough, in the Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon, this altar was buried down below in the crypt or wherever below the surface in that church, suddenly got exposed and realized, and now it is the central altar in the main church. There is a code within that altar, within that tomb. So that's also another example of the truth about who wrote the Shakespeare plays and sonnets.
Something comes forward.
It wasn't Shakespeare.
Yes.
It was Shakespeare. It takes us back to this other era, which I'm not sure we were alive, I don't know. But this Queen Elizabeth, John Dee.
Oh, yeah.
The spies and the intrigue. It's an amazing time.
Well, when I lived in Victoria, I had so many synchronicities around the Bacon brothers and John Dee, and your daughter has a memory from another time, back in time. And so, absolutely, I totally, and I love this too, that when Richard and Zia, I'm not joking, when they show up in my life, it's usually there's some kind of nugget that they drop in, and I'm about to go to the UK for 2.5 weeks. I'm going to go to England. Who knows? Maybe I'll go to Stratford-upon-Avon now. It's not quite on my list, but Richard had mentioned these 13 Hallows. He'd also mentioned Bardsey Island, which is where he'd had quite his own epiphany in that. And so these are all places on the south of Wales or parts of Wales. And so here I am getting ready to go on this adventure. And then these two walk into my house, and then we have this conversation. And even some of when I go traveling, is sometimes I don't even know what I'm going for. I'm going to be looking into these 13 hallows a little bit more deeply now. And just see, yeah, these termas and these offerings and what's coming forward in this time, because it can seem to be in like I don't know why I'm going to the love story wall, or I think I'm going to England because my sister's getting married. And meanwhile Merlin's saying that I got something else for you here. Not to go with expectations, but just like, okay, there's something more than meets the eye a lot of these times. Would you say?
I'm so excited for your trip, and we'll have to talk to you when you get back.
Oh, I'm excited. Okay. There we go. See what stories I have to tell, and I'll be getting to meet with Richard for a little bit. So maybe the Bard will have some things more nuggets to whisper into our ears that will. And now, actually, you spoke about this Into the Mystic event, and I know some of what really stood out. You were talking just then about the apocalypse. But Richard had a really powerful transmission, I thought, towards the end of the day on the nature of culture and exploring the 6 lines of the culture. You guys got this? Okay, so we have to tap into this. I think our intuition on this one is worth exploring a little bit more. So this will be, I'm trusting that there's something that these two are going to drop in here that adds a little to this this journey, because it was fascinating. I mean, I've explored and looked through the culture in many different ways, but Richard, if you've never been to an event, he'll add something, because he knows that there's people who are brand new to this, and then there are people who've been journeying with it for 9 years. And it's like,
we're waiting for that golden.
Yeah, what's the golden nugget? And I think that golden nugget, did you guys experience that? It was like sitting in this. What did you take from that you might share?
Well, perhaps I could just give you the overview.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, from my point of view, what he was talking about was Into the Mystic was the name of the whole day, but this was creating a mystic culture. So he began by talking about why the old system has fallen apart through the 6 lines of the culture. And the 6th line is the system. So essentially he said, because the other 5 lines are not working, 6th line system crashes, just falls apart, which is what is now happening. So then he said, so now we need to build this new culture, the mystic culture, through the lines of the culture. And we are talking about your particular line in your culture sphere, in your GT profile. So the 6 lines expand out from the individual to the system. So these are the words that he used, and obviously you can then interpret this in your own way. But the first line was the individual, which is about self-empowerment. The second line is when you're working in partnership with one other person, and this is where you nourish each other by bouncing things back and forth between the two of you. Then the third line, which is my line, so I was quite interested in this line, and that is a unit where you've got between 3 and 15 people. And the word he used here is this group of people strengthens the system. Now, it's really interesting because we are part of a group that meets once a month in Victoria, and we have a number, any number between, say, 8 and 20. Last Sunday we met, and there were exactly 10 people there, sitting outside in a circle, sharing. And I thought, wow, we're in the strengthening the system. That's exactly what we're doing. Then the fourth line is bigger than 15. It's the network. It's the pulling people together through the heart, and it's the supporting the system. It's that bigger group of people supporting the growth of this system. Then the fifth line are the natural leaders, and their role, and I'm delighted to see them doing this, is to create freedom in the system. When you look at what we've gone through over the last 3 years and even beyond that, and all the restrictions and limitations placed upon us, and now these are the people who are going to step up in some way to be the new leaders in the new earth, which will set us all free. And then the sixth line is the system itself. And I don't think Richard could have chosen a better word to describe the new system, which was the system itself will cherish you.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow.
That just hit me. I just burst into tears. I'm line 6.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So you're line 6 and you're line 3.
Yeah.
Well.
Beautiful. I mean, really, is that too much to ask? Oh my God.
So there is to it, really, isn't there?
Yeah,
Feel cherished, that's all.
yeah.
We all just need that.
But isn't that where most of the activism of the world today comes from? Is because we don't feel cherished by the system.
So it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. That was one of the big impacts for me. Do you want to add anything else to that?
No, just that sixth one really hit me hard. Like it's just, yeah. And I'm just so happy he included that whole piece. That whole piece was just so precious. I mean, the whole Into the Mystic was amazing. I enjoyed it right from the very beginning. He opens with a tea ceremony.
Yeah. We have water here today. I'm a bad host, but water is needed. So cheers. Yes. Yeah, that was the opening up with the tea ceremony. And for those who are watching, Jesse was up there, and then Yunbei. And Yunbei is somebody who shows up on a lot of the Clubhouse calls, and she's from China originally. I think she flew out from Munich, Germany, to be there.
Yeah.
And Richard, her and Jesse had quite a special connection, and so she was invited by Richard to come and join them. And just to have that kind of authentic connection there between the three of them, kind of, yeah, just really, it did open it up into just what so much of this is about, doesn't it? The pausing, the being together, the communing. And that's something that as we're talking here, I'm kind of intrigued as well, is that you two have been working together now since 2006. So that's like, do the maths, that's 17 years, right? And so there's this synergy here between the two of you. Do you see in your Gene Keys charts? It's rare that we have two people that are working together that we can just kind of pluck into your, like here you've got your Gene Keys charts. Can you see through the charts the synergy that emerges between the two of you and the unique gifts that you each bring to the table?
We have very few Gene Keys in common, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it's a complementary situation.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a commitment a long time ago to really create this energy between us where we work to balance the masculine and feminine within ourselves and within our relationship together. So we do healing work together as well. And in that healing work, we offer ourselves as vessels of masculine and feminine balance in supporting the person that's on the table that we're doing the work with. So there has been this ongoing connection, real commitment to live that.
Now, for me, and Azir can say what she feels, but for me, the key gene key for me is the field 44, which is my life's work,
Right.
which is synarchy. And for me, that synarchy is about having this crystal clear energy flow between me and everyone else I'm connected with. And so creating that really clear vessel of connection and dealing with anything that shows up immediately and not letting anything fester, but dealing with things quickly. But in the end, you don't have anything, nothing shows up. And, you know, we had a beautiful ceremony on Salt Spring Island last Friday. Again, one of these planting ceremonies of this terma, 6 of us, and the whole day spent together. We had to travel over to Salt Spring on the ferry and come back. Not one moment in the whole time we were together of anything out of alignment. It was just magical, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's what I'm always striving for. But I do also have the 45 in my culture with that line 3, which is looking for synergy. Right? It's looking for that working together as a team where the outcome is bigger and better than the separate halves. So I would say those two for me are probably the 2 most important ones. Again, I can throw in the 8 because that's where the weirdness comes in, right? That's my attraction sphere, right?
Okay.
So having gone from being the regular standard rugby playing, beer drinking teacher to this really right there guy now, what a shift that's been. So very comfortable with the weirdos that come into my life.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
I also want to say that between the two of us, we share the Ring of Gaia. So I have the 60th Gene Key as my life's work, and I also have it in my IQ.
Right.
And then I also have the 61, which is my vocation. So, and
I have the 19.
you have
Right.
where's
the 19?
19 is my purpose.
Purpose. Right.
I don't quite have that synesthesia that 19th GKP have.
Which is that incredibly expansive connection to all the senses crossing over each other.
Yeah.
And I was on a radio show a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying to explain this because I don't have it strongly. And in the chat box, one of the women put in the chat box, I could smell pregnancy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's synesthesia, right?
Yeah.
And how do you explain that? You can't.
My wife has got the 19th in her pearl sphere. And when she heard that about synesthesia, she hasn't dived into much. As far as she's concerned, she's just the 19th gene key. There's no other gene keys. This is the one she knows the best. But the synesthesia really spoke to her, and I see it in her a lot. And there was a song. It was Bradley Cooper in that Star Is Born, and I can't remember what it was, but the song title was it was like Music to My Eyes, I think, or something like that. So it was like that cross wiring of the senses, and I'm like, he's singing about synesthesia here. And so I just love that. I don't have the 19th gene key in my chart, but as I prepare for a trip to Wales, this 19th gene key, this return of magical thinking, I think, you two, it's like me and Nicole living together. We forget sometimes when we step out into the world how weird we are, because it's like, oh, right, we talk about this stuff all the time between us, and the same for you two. And just this opening up to the other realms within nature that's taking place now. And I think that just happens so much in everything your stories and your travels and everything that I hear about. And in this moment, I'm also drawn to this.
Let's have a Zia finish on the Ring of Gaia first.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. Just speak of the Ring of Gaia, and we do, like you're saying, so much work with the earth work, and the ceremony that we do. And so, for me, the 60th gene key is creating the sacred space and holding that container where.
Yeah, I really see that for people I know. I work with a woman who's a psychologist and a shaman, and she has the 60th as her life's work as well. And it's that space holding. And those who know Jesse Chestnut, he's our fire keeper for our clubhouse calls. And so it's like we create the space together, and then we connect in with him. Is it time to release? Is the fire ready? And the fire, it's ready. And then it can go burning through the community at that point. So when you see that and know that for yourself, I think I really see that as the ritual space holders, really. So
I just want to chip in on the 60th gene key, because it's really, really important now. And it's going back to January 21st this year, which was when the sun and moon were conjunct, and the moon was 0
degrees Aquarius, and Pluto was at 29 degrees Capricorn, and the new moon had just stepped into the 41st gene key, the start codon. And what's happened with Pluto, very slow moving. It's just edged over that boundary from Capricorn to Aquarius, got to 1 degree, stopped, gone back on May the 1st, it turned retrograde. It's now back in Capricorn. It's going to come forward again, then it's going to go back again, and it's not going to clear Capricorn until November 2024. But because it's so slow moving, it's just crossing that threshold. It's in the 60th gene key the whole time.
So
it's breaking down the old systems, the old structures in Capricorn to create the new structures in Aquarius. So I think we're going to see a lot of chaos continue for another 18 months until it all gets out. Because as we know, the Capricorn structure shadow side is really hanging on. And so we got to dig into all the corners to set it free. That's right. Yeah.
I think this is why we got the goosebumps when we were talking about the culture. It's
the new culture.
We're creating and co-creating this culture together.
Yeah.
And just
totally new ways of being within it. And something we've talked about, something that I've loved through my work with the dream art, but also through some of the Celtic shamanism that I've studied over the years, and just my own experiences and what I'm hearing, and maybe you guys can speak to this too, But there is, and again, it's this magical thinking aspect in a way. And when we talk about magical thinking, we're not talking about it in the kind of, it can be sometimes used in a condescending kind of way, magical thinking, but this is like anything Gene Keys. It's rooted, it's embodied magical thinking. It's just, it's magical knowing, I think, in a way.
Yeah.
And but what I'm seeing and hearing amongst more and more people is these veils are thinning, and we are having communications with fairy beings and elf beings and others that are supporting us. And you know, one of the things, and I've spoken to Rosie about this, with in the Celts, they would refer to the triune alliance, which was that we knew harmony in this world when there was, for every human, they had their animal companion, which I feel the dream arc speaks to, and they had the fairy companion. So there was the three, and we lived in this state of harmony. And so I'm wondering, in your work, are you seeing these veils thinning? Are you seeing an opening in more people with respect to some of this?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And people are having experiences not just in those realms, but also just having these incredibly powerful bliss experiences without really understanding why they're feeling so wonderful.
Right.
And I think one of the things our role is going to be in the future is to help people understand what it's just hit.
Right.
Because we are having this download of energy coming in, and people don't understand.
Yeah.
We're going to be there to say it's okay, you're not going mad.
Yeah.
We already are.
Yeah. Just like us.
It's a wonderful, good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
people are also just having the most amazing connections with nature, with animals, with wild animals, birds, all kinds of things happening. And for me, personally, like last February, there was this, I live in View Royal, really close to the gorge. And at night I was hearing this sound, like just this sound I could not describe. And it was just so mysterious and so loud and guttural. And I didn't know where it was coming from. And then it would go away. And then a few days later it would show up again. And then one night it came and it was just so loud. And a whole bunch of people, including me, ran out of our apartments and out to the water to see what the heck it was. And it was a seal. It was like an elephant seal.
Oh, wow.
And it was in distress. And
Okay.
sadly, because we all ran out so quickly, we scared it off and it took off again. But then it showed up the next day and it just came right up on the banks and it was trying to get into this woman's door, like her patio doors. And I looked to see what we were in, like what the sun was in Gene Keys at that time. And it was the 55th Gene Key.
No way, which is the seal.
And just that very same day, I got an email from Rosie Aronson asking if I would be a contributor to the Dream Arc. And I'm like, Rosie, you're not going to believe this. The seal is outside. I don't know what to do because so apparently it was molting and it was trying to find a safe place to go and to shed its skin. And these authorities kept coming along and putting it back into the water. But sad, the thing about that was that it actually needed to be on the land to shed its skin. Every time it went back into the water, the skin would soften again, and it would have to, pretty much start the process over again.
Wow.
So eventually, the wildlife people, they come and hopefully they get to a safe place where it can do that.
Fully do that. Yeah.
But those connections are just getting so strong. It's almost scary.
I'd been working with the Dream Arc for exactly a year to the day, and I had a midnight occurrence with a bear knocking on my door. It was a year to the day that I've opened the Dream Arc. So I give people a warning. Like, you don't know. I don't know who your anniversary visitor is going to be, but I got a bear.
Well,
But a seal.
Well, it's interesting, as you was explaining that story, Gracie, your dog, and put his head
Yeah.
on her leg.
Yeah. Yeah, you might have seen. You might be wondering what it is that's moving around down here. It's just my dog Gracie, who's she's very friendly, and she's got a 19th Gene Key purpose too, actually, just like just like she's quite shamanic in her ways, but she's very sensitive to energies. And sometimes what she did it once earlier when we were talking, but when there's energy moving and there's a story moving or being let go of, she'll just let out this kind of guttural, like the seal. And so she gets quite involved. She's been a great source of epiphany experiences for people. So I'll put a picture of her up at the end of this, so you can all see what she looks like. She's
So you want to talk about?
yes,
Which have this because this is to do with it.
yeah,
This orb is the 26th gene key, and in the study of the 26th gene key, Richard calls it the Great Cinnabar Field, and this is to do
with the magical, mystical aspects of the trickster. So Richard refers to the 26th gene key and includes Merlin in that. You're going to Merlin's land in Wales, and you said at the beginning this was the 26th gene key, is Wales, right?
Yeah, Richard
Biddy Barry had a great conversation with somebody about Wales and the 26th gene key. So yeah.
So the reason that this is a
Representative of the 26 gene keys in that city, it's called the Great Cinnabar Field, and that's because cinnabar is the main form of mercury mineral, mercury sulfide, and it's just as toxic as mercury metal. And here I am holding it. So it is itself a trick, just like the trickster energy. And you might or might not be able to see on the screen, but there are some slightly clearer areas in the inside. And it was an original pure clear quartz crystal. So what they do is they spin it until it's molten, then they inject the cinnabar inside, which is the pinky orange color, keep spinning it till it cools down. So the outside is quartz, so you can handle it, and the inside is the cinnabar. And because it's a toxin, it acts as a toxin remover from the body. It's an amazing trick. And we've worked with this on every sacred site we go to. We take it with us. We put it in the waters of Chalice Well, Mount Shasta, Panther Springs, wherever we go in the earth. And it just embraces everything, and it changes internally. It's got its own consciousness. You can see the colors shift and swirl. So this is the magical, mystical aspect of the 26th gene key, which is that trickster energy. Now you see me, now you don't. It's that Merlin energy. And it's like when you think about Merlin and King Arthur, Merlin didn't tell King Arthur what to do. He sent him on trail quests to work it out for himself, which is what you were going to do.
yes, it would seem so. I signed up to go to my sister's wedding, but apparently beings from other dimensions have other ideas. But I mean, that's
Any journey, isn't it? It's like we think we're doing something, and really there's some other, you know, and it might look the whole journey might look quite mundane on the, you know, to the, if somebody was to film me and follow it, but I'm sure just like me living here in this space, it's like just the magical experiences that take place, you know, to be able to see everything is a miracle for one thing, but just going there with the open mind to be like, yeah, okay, I think I'm going there for this, but perhaps I may be waking up to something new in my lived experience. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing this, and I have seen this at some events before, and so it always catches my attention. I have a bit of an affinity towards this 26th gene key, and I do, you know, you mentioned Wales as the 26th gene key, so that gift, the city of invisibility, Merlin's obviously behind that, and then the gift of artfulness, and when you talked about the Pacific Northwest earlier, there's another, that's the one that Richard associates with the 22nd gene key. So the countries, you know, and there are these different associations with gene keys. I find it quite fascinating. And with the cinnabar field, yeah, I wonder if I bring it up closer. No, it doesn't really go into focus then, so or will go out of focus. But you can't feel this, but you definitely, before I was holding it and when I'm holding it, it feels quite different. So yeah.
So when Richard came back here to celebrate his 50th birthday with his family, we gifted him a cinnabar ball.
Okay.
Almost exactly the same size.
Wow.
As this one.
So he's got that down in Devon, and
When you're going for tea.
we're going for tea.
Pull out the cinnabar ball.
Yes, we'll see.
Take it with his flames.
Yes. Yeah. I meet him after the journey. So it's almost like, okay, so is there going to be a test at the end? Like, what did you learn? What did you learn?
You know, when you do these journeys, as you said earlier, it's important not to have expectations for outcome.
But I found in my own journeys, when I've gone on these journeys, it's actually quite subtle at the time. And you just have to pay attention to what shows up and pay attention to the synchronicities in particular. But it's not until you come back that you start unraveling what's happened. And then you don't know sometimes for some time to come. And this wonderful guy, Anthony Thorley, who was one of the main Landscape Zodiac guys in Glastonbury, talks about this quantum physics concept called backwards causation.
Right.
And backwards causation means that you do something in the past and you don't know why you did it. And then sometime in the future, either you or someone else realizes you did that then for this moment now.
Yeah.
And I think that's what all of this that we're talking about is about.
What is that? Paying attention to those synchronistic moments. So I think I was just sharing with these before that one of the allures, something I've learned about in Wales is that there's this story of this Welsh Grail Cup, and it incidentally was held by the Powell family, and I'm married to a Powell, so there's extra interest there. But it's this Grail Cup that was supposedly from the cross of the crucifixion. That's it traveled. It was in Glastonbury originally, but then it became entrenched in a place called Strata, Florida in Wales. And so at one point I was sharing on Facebook that I have this, I'm going on a Grail quest. And I just said I'm going to the UK. And I just happened to post that. And this gentleman commented and said, well, you know, Wales has its own Grail Cup. And I was about to write something smart ass probably. And I realized that the person who commenting it was the author of the book that I'm reading at this very moment about this very cup. And so I took a picture of me holding the book and I said, you mean this book? And he was just flabbergasted, wow, what are the, and so I haven't had any further contact with him, but I'm just, okay, I'm paying attention. There's something more to this that I'm just good. No, yeah, no. Pretty but I'm just kind of paying attention to
the back to the front.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Backwards causation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's I got the 35th gene key, so it's like just hop to the end there. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, no, this is really fascinating. We've covered so much here, and there's a lot going on. Is there any particular things that at this time you guys are working towards that you'd like people to know about?
Got to allow everybody to be true to themselves. We can't do it for them. We've got to hold to this absolutely solid, grounded core center, which is what the core purpose in the base of our profile is all about. So getting really deeply connected to your own purpose in your own profile and living that becomes critically important. And knowing this is all going to work out really well in the end. So holding to that knowing that we are going to step into a new, beautiful world where we do cherish each other.
Yes, the system cherishes us.
Yeah.
The system cherishes us.
So you in your life. Where Pluto is right now.
Yeah, it's like I've been describing this the other day. I feel like I'm 0 degrees Aquarius, so I am right there. And it just feels like I'm in this old-fashioned washing machine sometimes. I'm just like getting through.
That's a good descriptor.
And
Yeah.
then you go from the washing machine into the wringer. That's just like. But for me, what really helps for me is just getting out in nature and just being in that pause, being in the stillness, and just soaking up all the sounds of nature, the subtle breeze, the birds who are singing so amazingly at this time of year, just merging with those songs, and I also love taking other people out in nature as well and helping them to connect. Yeah, I think that's so important. And then also just connecting with like-minded, like-hearted people, just like this conversation we're having here right now. It's so important right now to just have people that we can share with, and we're all on the same page. And it just opens this beautiful space.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you asked us earlier about how it works between us.
Yeah, and you just heard it.
I was just going to say, I heard two different. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I love. And
you know, and I can relate to both of them in what you're sharing there too. And, you know, this piece about the nature, I think, I mean, that's why I'm a big fan of the work of the Dream Arc. I feel that it is helping reconnect a lot of people to the nature that we are. I mean, we are the bears, we are the, you know, the eagles or whatever, the mosquitoes, we're the mosquitoes too, you know, we're all of them. And the taking those pauses in the silent, and we've had so many years online as well. To have that boots on the ground is the word that I hear used quite a bit. It's like to have that community of people that you can begin to connect with or continue to connect with in a real heart-centered way, and having those common visions and goals. So I love all the work that, you know, that you initiated with the Landscape Zodiac. That fired things for many of us, and you know, there's more Landscape Zodiacs being discovered all around the world now, part of that Termer and Turtons kind of thing. And you guys obviously have way more adventures to go on together, and I look forward to interviewing you again at some point in the future. I'm always been so grateful for meeting both Peter and Zia, and I'm really grateful that they took some time out to come and have this conversation. And I look forward to hearing more from them in the coming years, and I think we all will. And in the meantime, thank you for joining us here today. I love interviewing and connecting with other guides and ambassadors in the Gene Keys community and beyond. And we have more of them lined up to come each week. Not as many of them will be in person. This is a real blessing to be able to meet you both in person, because quite often we're on Zoom across continents. But we have quite a Gene Keys presence here on Vancouver Island. And it's largely due to these two and the number of people. There's people who heard that I was interviewing you in several calls this week, and Peter was the one that brought me into the Gene Keys. so we know that this is going to be a valued interview here today, and we look forward to more in the future. So thank you, Zia, and thank you, Peter, and thank you for bringing along your friends.